Hi everyone, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to share with you several ways on how to use that coffee dyed paper that we made a few weeks ago. So my first idea is printing on the coffee dyed paper. I actually shared this in that previous video where I shared how to create the coffee dyed paper. I'm going to leave that video linked in the top right hand corner. Now the great thing about this technique is you can use a laser jet printer or you can use an inkjet printer because you're not adding any liquid afterwards, after you do your printing. Here I have printed onto computer paper and old book pages, and I've just printed some older images. Once you have printed, you can use these as stickers. You can use them in your journaling, your card making. You can frame them, which is really fun to do as the book pages. You can make them into some of the other things that I have listed in this video. Now, the butterflies you see on the left-hand side there that I printed onto the old computer paper, I have actually made available as a download in my Etsy shop. So I have a PDF with cut lines, so you can cut them out with your scissors, or I have a PNG with a clear background, so you can kind of do with that as you wish. Use them as stickers, use them in your digital scrapbooking, your journaling, things like that, or you can coffee dye them. But that kind of leads me to my next idea, and that is creating your own ephemera. Now with this technique, I actually like to print beforehand, before I do any of my dyeing. Now because I do it that way, I do need to use a laser jet printer. You can't use an inkjet for this because once you dunk it in that liquid, the coffee liquid, it's actually going to smear. So you do need to use a laser jet printer. You can find them fairly cheaply with just black and white. A color LaserJet printer is a little bit more pricey. However, I will say if you do a lot of printing, this saves a lot of money because toner lasts a lot longer than an inkjet printer ink. Just something to think about. I really love mine. It worked out well for us with homeschooling, and it works out well for me in my crafting too. And just a side note, you can foil your laser printed images too. But what I do is I take all of my images that I've collected and I print them off. Then I go ahead and just fussy cut them. You can use your cutting machine or whatever, but I just use a pair of scissors and fussy cut them out. Now, hopefully by the time I have this up, I will have one ephemera pack on my Etsy shop. I am working on it, but it's been a busy week. So we'll see if I get it up, but it will be an Easter pack with some of the eggs that you see here. But I fussy cut all of these images out, and then I take them and I just plop them in a coffee dye bath. So this is just warm water, almost hot water, with some instant coffee. If you want them a little lighter, use tea, or you can use regular coffee, leftover coffee grounds, and just whatever you use is going to give you a different result. I like the instant coffee because it's a little bit darker and it kind of dyes those colors as well that I'm working with. Now I just dunk all of these images in. The one thing you want to make sure is that they are submerged. So if you don't submerge them, the ink can almost resist the water and it'll just float on top. It won't ever soak up your water. And once I've dunked these in, I let them sit for a good 15 minutes. Now, these are printed onto cardstock, so they can handle that. If you print onto computer paper, it's going to be a quicker process. But on cardstock, about 15-20 minutes, and then I pull them out and just let them dry on a couple of towels. You can sprinkle some coffee grounds over the top to give you some splotchiness if you want. I just let these all dry. I didn't do anything different with them. Just plop them down and let them dry. And then when they dry, they are beautiful. You can iron these. You do want to be careful adding heat to the laser printed images. Just use a piece of parchment paper over the top and it should be good. But here you can see it just gives them this really fun vintage look. These are so much fun. I love all the little older images and the older kind of ephemera that you can create with this. Here are some I did in that previous video, receipts, book pages, things like that. Those were printed off onto just regular computer paper. And then I coffee dyed them from there, cut them out and scrunch them up to give it that look. You can even ink these up a little bit afterwards. As long as you're not going to put any more liquid on them, they should be good to go and ready to be inked if you want to go that route as well. And one final look at my little egg basket here, and that is going to lead me to my next idea, and that is die cutting all of your different coffee dyed paper and using them in your paper crafts. So here's a quick card I made. I'll show you very quickly. I just took an old book page, and these work great with your cover dies. Now, I am using an Altenew striped leaf cover die. I will say though, cover dies are a little pricey. These can be used with regular die cuts though as well. Circle dies, square dies, whatever you want to use. These work beautifully with your dies. I have not tried it with my cutting machine yet. I just purchased a new cutting machine, and I haven't tried it yet. I hopefully will soon, but I'm not quite sure if these will hold up through it. We will see. I'll try it out and I'll let you know. But I went ahead and used my metal adapter cutting plate under this. I always do that with any intricate dies. And I do have a video on that product. I will leave that linked in the top right-hand corner. But it just puts a little extra pressure and it makes cutting these out a little bit easier. You don't need to run them through several times to get a nice cut. But you can see how beautifully this cuts out of that book paper. So essentially, this is the same weight as your computer paper. So it cuts fairly easily and it cuts really nicely, and you end up with this gorgeous, gorgeous cover for your cards. And you can use these any number of ways on your card projects. I just went ahead and created a very, very simple birthday card with this. So I went ahead and added some adhesive around the edges. And then to secure the center of this, I will be using a glue stick just to help those center pieces stick down. Now, one thing I will mention about using these in die cuts and using these really thin book pages, you do need to be careful. These, as you've added liquid to them, they do become a little bit more fragile. So just be careful with them. I did rip mine a little bit. Not a big deal. I can piece it back together and glue it down. You won't even know. But just be careful with them. They are a little bit more fragile because of that extra liquid added and just because of the nature of an older book page. I glued this onto an A2, so 4¼ by 5½ inch card base. And on that card base, I had done a little bit of ink blending with some distress inks, a little bit darker towards the top, lighter towards the bottom for an ombre effect. And then I just placed my cover die right on top of that, and I had this gorgeous card. The only thing left to do was add my sentiment. And like I said, I made mine into a simple birthday card, so I used a happy die cut and a birthday stamp and added a little bit of faux stitching with a black pen. Now also you can see I did my little egg basket. So this is a die, I believe from Cat Scrappiness. I'm not sure if it's still available. If it is, I will leave it linked in the supply list down below. If not, I will try to find something similar. And you can fill up these die cuts with your little ephemera. So mix and match your ideas too. It's really a lot of fun. This would look cute on a card, an Easter card, or a scrapbook or journaling page. A lot of fun to play around with and get more use out of your dies. Now, the next idea, this is a little bit of a longer tutorial. I will do a separate video on this, but just for the sake of this video, we're going to kind of keep it short. Try to, anyway. You can use these dyed papers to create your own journals and notebooks. Now, this first one is a really, really simple little notebook. These are great for kids, craft fairs, if you're into selling your things at craft fairs, for your purse, for little notes, things like that, or just to use as a little bitty journal, like a quick little journal. So what I like to do is use a 6x6 piece of paper, cardstock, or pattern paper. And then I like to cut my paper down to size. So 3 inches, if you fold your cardstock in half, your pattern paper, your 6x6 piece of paper is 3 inches when you fold it in half. So I like to go 6 inches wide and then about 5 inches, 4 inches. You can do 6 inches tall, however you want to do this. This is 5 inches tall by 6 inches wide. I am cutting each one of these papers. Now this is another great way where you can mix and match your different papers. I used some composition paper, some regular loose leaf notebook paper, and some graph paper in these notebooks. It all turned out beautifully. But then I take my piece of cardstock, my 6x6 piece of cardstock, and I trim it down to 6 inches wide by 5 inches tall. Then it's time to fold everything in half. You can bunch these all together and fold them in half. I like to do it individually though, just because I feel like I get a better crease and I feel like I get it more precise that way. Now in these notebooks, you can fit about 5 to 6 pieces, but each piece is actually going to double. So if you put 5 in, you're going to get 10 pieces. If you put 6 in, you're going to get 12 pieces. Any more than that, it gets a little bit thick. However, you probably can make it work. So here I am just folding each one of those 5 pieces of paper in half. So I end up with a piece of paper that is 3 inches wide by 5 inches tall. And you can resize this to fit your needs. All you need to do is make sure that you can cut double the width that you want, and then you need to make sure that your height you can handle as well in your cover. Then I take my cover and I do the same thing. Fold it in half. Again, this measured 5 inches tall by 6 inches wide. So once I fold it in half, it's going to be 3 inches wide by 5 inches tall. I like to use my bone folder to give it a nice crease. If you don't have a bone folder, use your finger, use a pen, use an acrylic block. Anything heavy with a nice sharp edge on it is going to give you that nice crease. Then I start layering these pages up, putting them one right on top of the other like you would find in a notebook, and you can arrange these however you want to. Then I slip it inside the cover and make sure everything is nice and tucked into that crease and nice and aligned. Then I like to use a couple of paper clips to hold everything in place. This just helps me and my quirkiness to keep everything lined up and I don't have to mess with it so much. And I know nothing has moved this way. So a couple of binder clips really holds that in place and just gives me that extra set of hands that I don't have. Then I use a stapler and I just give it a staple in the middle and then on both sides as well. You want to make sure that it is lined up on that crease whenever you staple. And here I've done it to where I'm stapling from the inside to the outside. However, that's going to put that back staple where the two ends meet on the outside of your notebook. So if you flip it over and staple from the cover down, that's going to put the inside of the staple or the bottom part of the staple on the inside of the notebook where you want it. So flip it over, make sure your cover's on top and staple down through the pages. And again, just make sure that your stapler is lined up with the crease. Staple once in the middle and then on both sides and you're good to go. Here are some other ones I've made. One, I made a I believe it's a 3.5 by 3. And then the other one I made 4 by 3, and these all turned out so cute. You can make these any size you want. Now on that same note, you can make a larger journal. So here I took some dot grid paper that I had coffee dyed. This dot grid I printed off from a free website where you can print off the dot grid. And I'm just going to trim down that excess along the edges with my X-Acto knife and my Tim Holtz ruler. This Tim Holtz ruler is in one of my card making videos where I share what I think is necessary for a beginner card maker. This ruler is one of the best purchases I've ever made, and I believe it's only like $5 or $6. I will leave it linked down below. One of the best investments I've ever made. Then I take each one of these and I fold it in half. Now at this point, I did not do any measuring. I just cut off using my ruler to line up with those edges, cut off a certain amount on each side. You can do that and make sure that each one is exactly the same. They don't have to be exactly the same. You're just going to get a more vintage look that way or more of a junk journal look that way. But I went ahead, made sure mine were all the same size and trimmed them down. Now, if you do it that way, then you need to go ahead and measure once you fold them in half. So I folded them in half, fit them together, and now I'm going to do a little bit of measuring so I know how big to make my piece of paper for the cover. Now, whenever you're making your cover, you just want to make sure that you measure the height and you measure the width all the way across. Then what I like to do with the width all the way across is add about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit less. So here I have about 7.5 tall by about 10 inches wide. So again, I like to double check my measuring just because I am a measure twice, cut once kind of girl. This just looks to be a little bit more than 7.5 and then about 10 inches wide. So I will cut my piece of cardstock to be just a smidge over 7.5 to accommodate my height. And I will cut it about 10 1/8 to accommodate all those pages on the length or the width, excuse me. Now, whenever you cut your paper, you do want to make sure that the orientation is how you want it, especially on a piece of paper that has a right way to have it. So here I wanted my stripes to go horizontally, so I made sure I cut 7.5 on the length of it, and then on the width I made sure I went to that 10 1/8. And then I just line up the corners as best I can and then give it a fold right in the center, and this is going to create my cover. Now for this, I used patterned paper, and I wanted it to be pretty on both the inside and the outside, so my paper is double-sided. Then I just tuck everything together. Again, I use that dot grid paper, and for my grid paper, I did not print on both sides. I just printed on one, and this is going to give me on the center 2 blank pages, and then on each page as I flip it over, it's going to be dot grid on one side, plain on the other. If you want dot grid on both sides, double print on both the front and the back of your paper, and then do your coffee dyeing. Really simple and easy to do. So once I have gotten everything inside of my cover, I'm going to line everything, stack it up, and use my ruler to mark right in the center of this. So 7.5, I marked at 3 3/4. Then from 3 3/4, I'm going to come an inch on both sides of that. So at 2 3/4 and at 4 3/4, and I'm going to put little tick marks. Then I'm going to go an inch out from that. So I was at 2 3/4, so I'll go at 1 3/4. And then I will go ahead and I was at 4 3/4, so I will put 5 3/4. So start at the center and then come out 1 inch and make your tick marks. Make your tick mark in the center, come out an inch, make a tick mark both sides of that center mark, and just keep going until you're pretty close to the edges. Now you don't have to do this many tick marks. You could get away with 3. I like the look of it better like this, so I put more tick marks in. And this is going to be for sewing my journal together. Now, by all means, use your stapler on this if that's what you want to do. You can also use a sewing machine, which I will show you in a moment. However, I love the look of sewing this together by hand with embroidery thread, so that's what I'm going to do. I used my little pokey tool from Tim Holtz, and I am just going to poke through all of my different layers where I made those tick marks. So I have my tick mark from the center, then my inch out on both sides, inch out on both sides, until I have all those poked through. Then I'm using embroidery thread that matches the cover of this, and I am going to come through the inside to the outside through that center hole. Then pick the top or the bottom and start sewing. I'm going to go either way. It doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong way to do this, but you're going to come up through a hole next to it. Make sure you pull that tight and then pull it back through to the inside. Then you're going to go to the next hole from that, and you're going to go back through to the cover side. Then you're going to go up through the next one closest to it, and you're going to pull back through the cover, making sure that you pull each one of those fairly tightly. Then, once you hit that top, wherever your top is and you have no more holes to go up, you're going to start going back down. So you're just going to do a running stitch essentially. Now, if you're having trouble with your beginning stitch kind of moving around, use a piece of low tack painter's tape and tape it down while you're sewing. That's going to keep it out of your way. It's going to keep it from getting tangled, and it's going to keep it from going through to the opposite side. Now you're going to work your way back down through to the center, and then you're going to do the exact same thing, going through each one of those holes back and forth on the other side of your center hole. Now, as I'm doing this, you can see that again, I have used those binder clips to hold everything together. Those binder clips are going to be your best friend and your extra set of hands to keep everything in line. It's not going to shift on you. It just keeps everything straight and nice. You can flip and rotate this as you need to without worrying that everything is in place. I'm using smaller ones here, but if you're doing a larger journal, you can get bigger ones to hold everything in place. They come in different sizes, and I will leave some of those linked down below as well. Now, once you get back to the center, you're going to end up on the cover side. I like to tie a little knot just by going under my last stitch and then creating a little loop with that thread and then sticking my needle through the loop and tying a little knot. Now, I don't like the look of the knot on the outside, so I'll show you what I do. I go back through that center hole with my needle, and you need to do this anyway to get your thread back to that side. You're going to come back through that center hole once you've tied your knot, and you're going to pull until that knot pops through. It creates like a little pop noise. You'll know when it's through and you can see it. Then once it's through, I like to just make sure it's nice and secure with another small little knot by doing the same thing, going under that last stitch, creating a little loop and tying a knot. Then I'll go ahead and release my painter's tape. I've got my little extra thread here. I will take my thread that I just cut and tie one more little knot, and that's going to keep everything nice and tidy. You can trim off the ends, and your journal is complete. It's ready to go, and you know it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to fall apart on you. I used embroidery thread for this, just the DMC floss. It comes in so many different colors. I used a coral color here, and I used an embroidery needle, and really simple and easy to do. There are much better videos on doing your sewing for bookbinding and things like that online. That's just my simple way to do it. And like I said before, if you want dot grid on both sides, just double print like I did here on that journal. Also, if hand sewing isn't your thing or you're like, that's too much work, you can also run these journals through your sewing machine. So here I have just some craft cardstock as my cover and some different notebook pages that I have put into the journal just like I did before, using those binder clips to hold everything together. And I'm just using white thread and a straight stitch on this. Then I'll just run down through the center of this journal. I like to do cover side up, so that is where the top stitch goes. So that's what shows on the outside. And I run it all the way down, and then I just cut off the strings and it's ready to go. Super simple and easy. You can do this on any size. You can do this on the smaller ones. You can do it on the larger ones. Here I've created a number of them. They all turned out beautiful. Love to use these with my coffee dyed paper. Another idea is to use your coffee dyed paper for bookmarks. This is one of my favorite ways to use old book pages and old sheet music. I know tearing apart a book to use as a bookmark, it is what it is. I love the look of it, but I love doing this especially with encyclopedia pages. So here I have this beautiful image of a plant, and I also have, it's the indigo plant, I believe, and I also have the description of it right above. So I'm just going to cut out that section with my paper trimmer and leave that all intact. So I have the description of the indigo plant from the encyclopedia. I have the picture of the indigo plant. I'm just going to cut all of that out, and that is going to be my bookmark. Really simple and easy to do. All that's left to do is laminate it. Now, another easy thing you can do is stencil on them. So here I have an old book page, and I'm just going to use a silhouette stencil. This one is from Heidi Swap. It's an older one. There are tons of silhouette stencils out there. You can use a silhouette stamp. Tons of companies have them. Layering stamps, if you have those, just use the biggest layer on there, your first layer, and that's going to be your silhouette. You can also add stickers onto these. So here I have some butterfly wings that I have made available in my Etsy shop too. And I actually printed these onto clear sticker paper. And I'm just going to fussy cut them out and stick it on to a piece of old book page that I have coffee dyed and cut out. Now, because I printed onto clear sticker paper, the book words are still going to peek through. It's going to give this almost a translucent effect. Really, really neat. If you wanted it to be more opaque, print it off onto white sticker paper, or you could just print it onto regular cardstock or vellum and glue it on that way. And I actually did a butterfly wing, one on both sides, so it looks like it's kind of folded over the bookmark. And like I said, I do have this download available in my Etsy shop now. With this one, it is just one PDF with a white background, and then you also have the PNG with the clear background, so you can kind of cut them out, play around with them, use them in your journaling, use them in your digital scrapbooking, things like that. Now, another great thing to do to make your bookmarks is to layer these up. So here I have some old sheet music. This just came from a book of sheet music, I believe, for the violin that I found at Goodwill for like a quarter. I dyed a bunch of these sheets. I'm going to cut out the paper to the size I want. Then I just ripped some scrapbooking paper, layered that on, trimmed it out to match the bookmark, and then over the top, I'm just going to put some dried flowers. Now, these came from my yard. I will have a video this summer when things start to bloom again on how to dry your own flowers for things like this. Really simple and easy to do. Doesn't take a lot of work, and you can have it done in a matter of like 15 minutes. So no waiting around for months and months. But I just layered on a piece of a bush from outside that I had dried, and I didn't even glue it down. I'm just going to seal everything together by laminating it. I like to laminate my bookmarks because if I'm reading, I'm probably drinking something. Sometimes we spill, and I don't want this coffee dyed paper, if it were to be spilled onto, to transfer onto my book pages that I'm reading. So I like to just keep everything nice and sealed up with my laminator. Plus, it makes them last a little bit longer as you're working with them. Gives them a little bit more heft too. All right, so my last idea is going to be using all of those scraps that we've accumulated. And with those scraps, you can make some paper ruffles. Just did a video on this. I'm not going to go through the whole thing again, but I will leave that video linked in the top right-hand corner so you can go ahead and check that out. These are really easy to make. I'm using the paper scraps. This is also a great way to use some of those encyclopedia pages that you really quite don't know what to do with. Maybe some of the maps in them, those make really great paper ruffles. Maps that you're just not ever going to use in your journaling. And all you want to do is cut these into strips. So I'm using those encyclopedia pages. I'm using some of these scraps of the book pages that I have that I've die cut out of. I'm using some of the music sheets that I have made my bookmarks out of. And all of those scraps are great for this technique. All you do, cut out strips, fold them up into like a little accordion style, run them through your sewing machine, and you create these beautiful paper ruffles. Like I've said, just did a video on it. Check it out if you want to know more about that. But I will show you the results of these. Now, I cut out a lot of strips, and I did different things with them. So some of them I just did a big long strip of just map pieces together. Some I did really long strips of music pieces together. Then some of these I did where I mixed and matched. So here you can see I've got some map ruffles in there. And again, with those maps that I'm never really going to use, I have now made them into paper ruffles. They look beautiful. You can't really tell exactly where they are, but they look really neat. Then I've mixed and matched some of these old book pages, music pages, things like that. That is going to do it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and a look at how you can use that coffee dyed paper. The links to everything I used or that I can link is going to be linked down below in the description box. If you haven't subscribed already, be sure to do so. Happy crafting, everyone!